Now, yesterday, Adam Kaplan from InsideTheBirds.com, Andrew DiCecco today. Jeff Mosher will be on Mondays as we have the InsideTheBirds.com football at 4 here on the Sports Bash. Andrew DiCecco joins us now to talk a little NFL, a little football, to get us ready for a happy hour Friday. Andrew, welcome back, bud. What's going on?
Hey, what's going on, fellas? Good to be with you.
Yeah, man. We got a lot of interesting stuff to dive into today based on what Adam said yesterday during this segment, and we want to get some of your thoughts on this as well. I want to go – I know we talked a little bit about this earlier in the week, but some of the stuff that he had to say about let's start with Jason Peters and that whole thing. You know, he had said he asked somebody in the organization, hey, be straight with me here. Who will be the starting left tackle? And he said the guy the source didn't have an answer to that, but he felt pretty strongly that if they have interest in Peters, it means that they don't really believe in Andre Dillard. And I want to try to get your opinion on, do you feel that that's the case, that they just simply don't trust Andre Dillard at this point? Not whether or not he can play or that he can turn into a good left tackle. Do you think that the Eagles simply don't trust Andre Dillard right now? And what, does that message mean that they think they're a Super Bowl contender and that bringing in a veteran like Peters gets them closer to that?
Well, I can certainly tell you that they do, but I've always been more of a, what are you showing me? And, if Jason Peters' name is starting to swirl around this time, that's like Adam was saying yesterday, his name doesn't get mentioned if they have any semblance of confidence in Andre Dillard. And right now he could be ready, Andre Dillard, but there hasn't been any offseason, activity. So there's really no way of knowing.
So Jason Peters at this point at 39, he had said that he thinks he can play into his 40s. Do you think that any chance that the Eagles would bring him back on a multi-year deal and hold back Dillard for multiple years? Like, if it comes down to, I'll only play if it's like they might want Jason back for one more year, but do you see him coming back on a multi-year deal?
Not on a multi-year deal. It's really hard to kind of commit to an extra 2 years of Jason Peters when you traded up to get Dillard. So I think that kind of like what I was talking about earlier in the week is, I've always been a proponent and let your young players play. You trusted your draft team and to make this pick in Andre Dillard, you invested significant draft capital in bringing him in. I think you really need to move forward with him. And, if you do bring in Jason Peters, obviously he said that he's only coming on board with the intention of starting. I think that, you can only commit to 1 year for him.
I'm very interested to hear about your thoughts on Andre Dillard. Do you think the right tackle game last year factors into the equation when they think about the future of Andre Dillard?
I think so, but like we were saying, when he played on the left side, he showed signs of he showed signs of making strides as a rookie. He struggled on the right side, but there's a lot to like from Andre Dillard from what you saw. He didn't have that much opportunity to play. But, I think that obviously like Adam was saying, and like I've been saying, is he needed to get stronger. He needed to get bigger. He needed to get more physical. He did get into a fight in training camp. That's something that you like to see, but he needed to add some size, get stronger, and able to kind of hold that left side down moving forward.
So here's the one, when you look at it right now, you've got that left tackle spot. Right now it's Dillard because Peters is not signed. Isaac Seumalo, Jason Kelce, who did come out and said it's hard to imagine playing without Jason Peters. He said that just yesterday. With the irony in all this is that he comes out and says that yesterday when Peters' name is kind of firmly in the mix. Then, of course, you have Brandon Brooks and Lane Johnson. So that offensive line right there, are they better with Andre Dillard playing left tackle, or are they better with Jason Peters playing left tackle? Because the rest of the unit is the same as it's been for essentially the last two seasons.
Mm-hmm. Well, right now, given what we have to go off of with the no off-season activities, all we really have to go off of is Jason Peters playing at a fairly high level. At 37 years old, he's a future Hall of Famer. Anytime you have a guy that has that's going to be a Hall of Famer, you're a better team. And really, when you look at the offensive line, there's not a whole lot of experience in the reserves right there. You have Matt Pryor, who is their elder statesman, who only played 2 games. So right. I think that you really need to add him in.
Andrew, I want to get into some of the stuff that Doug Peterson said here recently. He said, I think what we've done as a staff in the offseason with our scheme evaluation, making things better, the staff hires that I've done to bring in new thoughts, new ideas, and ways to enhance our offense. I think the offense is going to be a little bit different. So how do you take those comments? Is that him saying, well, we have a heck of a lot more weapons, we have more speed, we have different gadgets? So does he say that the offense is going to be a bit different because of the weapons, or what they're going to do in terms of play calling?
I would say more so in terms of play calling and philosophy. In my opinion, I feel like they're going to try and have similar offense to what the San Francisco 49ers have, that fast, spread you out offense that really can spread the ball out to a number of players and really add that vertical element in there. I really think that, and that's really the way that offenses are trending right now. The Eagles they were limited in what they could do last season because of the lack of speed that they had. They were very speed deficient. So their offenses were kind of laboring and very much dependent on sustaining these 10-play drives that, that's not a recipe for success.
Andrew DiCecco is with us. Of course, you can read his stuff at 973ESPN.com. It's Football at 4, powered by InsideTheBirds.com. And, Andrew, you mentioned the 49ers there. They don't have that star player. I guess the tight end, obviously, similar to the Eagles, is their star player. But the Eagles receivers, you would think, with Deshaun Jackson being healthy, gives them a little bit of something that I don't want to say they don't have, because they do have a lot of speed. It's just they don't have that marquee number one wide receiver. So do we think that with Carson Wentz and the weapons here that the Eagles offense could be, I don't want to say an elite offense, but, basically a much, much better version than the one we saw last year?
No question. Obviously it's very dependent on their health, and that's always been the big hampering on the offense in recent years. But I think that the Eagles offense has a chance to really become an elite offense under Carson Wentz. And Miles Sanders, I think he's going to be a breakout player, could have up to 50 catches next season. He's really ready to shoulder the load there. And, who knows? They probably will add a veteran running back to the mix there to get those tough yards. You have Boston Scott. Like you said, you have Deshaun coming back healthy, and you added some intriguing young weapons in the draft. And you have two of the best tight ends in the game right there in Zach Ertz, and certainly Dallas Goedert, I think, is going to take that next step forward here in 2020.
You mentioned the weapons that they added in the draft, and Jalen Reagor is one of them. And the most interesting thing that I see every time he's brought up is the amount of yards Vegas has set for him for the over-under. And I value that, because Vegas is normally in the ballpark for a reason. And the number is 800.5 yards. How do you think the offense will utilize him to get him to about that range?
Well, 800 yards is a lofty goal, I would say. It's especially coming off of a shortened off season, like we were saying. It takes time, especially at the wide receiver position, to kind of, they're typically behind the curve, and as far as getting up to speed with the playbook and having to get on board with what the offense is doing. I think that they're going to find ways to get him the ball on jet sweeps. They're going to find the way to get him the ball on screens. They're going to send him deep. They'll find a bunch of that you can use him a myriad of ways. So I think that they'll find creative ways to get him the football. I would say more so around the 500 to 600 yard mark would be more realistic in my opinion.
So let me ask you, Andrew, which of the other guys, Hightower, Quez Watkins, or other, which of the lesser-known guys maybe excites you the most that people don't think are going to add much to this offense, but you think might actually bring something to the table?
John Hightower for me. I had a chance to watch John at the East-West Shrine Bowl. Started off the early in the week. He had, I believe it was 3 drops in the first practice. He was a guy I went in there really excited to see, and I was like, oh man, he's not off to a great start. But he really rebounded as the week went on. He separated from every corner that was there. He tracked the ball well, which is something I didn't necessarily see from him on film. He tracked the ball a lot better than I saw. And he runs really good routes. He only played 2 years at Boise State. He spent his first 2 years at junior college, Hines Community College, and he was remarkably productive there. But in Boise State as a senior, he ended his senior season, I believe, with 18.5 yards per catch. And he's also we talked about special teams earlier in the week, and he's a guy that made an impact as a kick return on special teams. So I certainly think he can be a factor there.
Keeping it with the wide receivers, Alshon Jeffrey obviously will not start the season with the team. What happens if J.J. Arcega-Whiteside finally takes that step in his career where he's having a decent season and then Alshon Jeffrey returns? How do you think the Eagles will now utilize him?
Well, to your first point, I actually do think that J.J. Arcega-Whiteside will turn the corner in the second season. You know, you heard the interview that he had on that 100 Rounders podcast, and kind of the pain that he was playing through, coupled with, you know, learning the offense as a rookie is never an easy task. But so I think he should be fine with the second year in the system. You know, you're bringing Alshon back after, you know, if say he does start on PUP, which I think he will. You're going to have to kind of integrate him slowly into the offense, but it's kind of hard to take JJ out if what I'm thinking is if he's going to be playing well and the offense is gelling. I think Alshon will certainly have a role, probably as a red zone target, but, you know, in a perfect world, the Eagles have JJ and they have Jalen Reagor and you have Deshaun as your top three guys.
All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Andrew DiCecco, Football 4, powered by InsideTheBirds.com. Let's take a look at, the one interesting thing. I want to go back to Hightower real fast because he's at Boise State and a guy that was a fifth-round pick now. And then Watkins, I really want to go back to both those guys because Watkins was a guy the Eagles said they would have felt comfortable taking in the fifth round. And I wonder what was it, that about him that fell to the sixth round? Because you mentioned Hightower and you're excited about him. I'm kind of intrigued by Watkins as when I look around the league and I see these speed guys, these smaller guys, and they get used in such a variety of ways. Like Hightower, I think is a more, I don't want to say polished, but kind of has that wide receiver look about him, whereas Watkins is kind of becoming like the new look wide receiver. I'm kind of intrigued. Do you think he has a role? I know the other day you didn't have him making the team, but if he does make the team, does he have a role that is an exciting role?
Well, I think it could ultimately come down to him versus Marquise Goodwin as far as that six wide receiver spot. And I think it'll ultimately go to Goodwin. The reason why I think Quez Watkins slipped a little bit in the draft is that he's still far from – he hasn't quite scratched the surface of what he can be. He's still a little bit of a raw prospect. He ran the third fastest 40 time at the NFL Combine. And so he does have that downfield element. He needs to get a little bit stronger and a little bit bigger. But I think, being around the program for his season, which I actually don't know that he makes the 53-man roster. But I think, getting him in the system, getting him in the NFL weight training program, and I think that he can be a prominent piece to the offense moving forward. But I don't necessarily know that he's ready yet in 2020.
Yeah, and I look strictly at that speed element that they talked about. Can you run? Are you healthy? Do you love the game? And he was, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, had the second fastest 40 time. That's why I'm talking about how intrigued I am about using him on jet sweeps and all the stuff that you hear now when I don't want to say gadget players, but when you hear about a receiver who maybe is a little bit raw and needs to just manufacture touches, that guy intrigues me in that role.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and he does have some work to do as far as a route runner and learning the finer nuances of the position. But the talent level is there. Like you said, I believe he was the third fastest 40-yard dash at the NFL Combine. There's something to be said for that, which is exactly why you hear a lot of excitement when the Eagles got him. But I mean, he does have a little bit of work to do. But like I was saying, I do see him being a piece of the offense. I just don't necessarily know if he's ready to be that piece in year one.
On the latest Inside the Birds, I know Adam mentioned Bailey, the wide receiver from Morgan State, who was an undrafted wide receiver. What are your thoughts on him? Do you think he has a possibility of raising some eyebrows?
I think so, but it's very crowded at position. The Eagles have actually, you look at Manisa Bailey, and they got him from Morgan State. The Eagles have found, I believe it was Josh Andrews, an offensive lineman who went undrafted a few years ago.
We lost Andrew there. I'm interested because you had mentioned, and I think we can get that bite from Adam Kaplan here and kind of play that bite to see exactly what he was talking about. And, there's a situation where at wide receiver, you have, as Andrew was getting into, a very, very deep group of guys. But here's what Adam Kaplan said on the Inside the Birds podcast.
I want to give you a sleeper. He won't make the team because well, theoretically he could if they had an offseason. But there's a kid named Manasa Bailey from Morgan State who they signed. They gave some money to. This kid could flat out bleeping fly. And he's not small. So he's from Morgan State. They got some good information on this kid. I don't quite know how I never heard of him. I did a little digging here. This kid could run, and he's not small. But as you correctly said, this year it's going to be even harder for an undrafted free agent to make it at receiver. But for practice squad possibility, absolutely. If this kid could flat out run, and he's not small.
So there you go. You heard Adam Kaplan there, and you heard what Andrew was saying. And Andrew, he said, I didn't know much about him. See, Andrew's the guy that knows about these guys. Andrew does a lot of the NFL draft preparation for InsideTheBirds.com and covers the Eagles and some other teams around the league before joining us here at 97.3. So he has a lot of insight on guys like that. And as you heard, he's a guy who can flat out fly, another speed guy. But again, it goes back to how many of these guys can make the team.
Well, the difference is, though, speed guy with size. Rager smaller, you're talking about a speed guy that can be bigger than the most average speed guys. Maybe that plays a role. Now, listen, that doesn't mean he's going to step in and just be this stud. But last year we saw the Eagles have to go into the practice squad route. They had to. So if you have to this year and you have a player like that sitting there, is that way better than the Greg Wards, the Rob Davises of the world?
Well, I think it's definitely better than, like, Ward served the purpose. He was a guy who caught the ball, moved the chains. The problem was trying to find the guy on the outside that could replace Deshaun Jackson. Like, Ward, you don't have to have a guy. Everybody doesn't have to run 4-2, 4-3, 4-4. But when you have nobody that can do it, they couldn't find a guy to replace him at that. They couldn't find anybody to replace what Deshaun Jackson gave them.
Now, do you think the Eagles are going way too heavy on just speed and not so much anything else?
No, because I think they feel comfortable. I know people say Deshaun Jackson and whether or not he's going to be healthy or not. They're anticipating him being healthy. And if he's not, now we brought in 5 guys who can do what he does. Whereas last year, if Deshaun Jackson gets hurt, we got nobody that does what he does. Now we have J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, and if he ends up not really working out, well, we have a couple of other guys who do, so they have now kind of made their depth chart more congruent to what they have at the top of the depth chart. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
We just played, Andrew, the bite that Adam talked about Bailey on Inside the Birds podcast, and he talked about, here's this sleeper guy, but he's a big guy who can run, but he said, I don't think he's going to make the team, but it just shows, I think the Eagles did a good job in the offseason of stockpiling behind their starters or their anticipated starters so that, like last year, when Jackson got hurt, they were ill-prepared to fill his role. They had nobody. Now if Jackson gets hurt, they have a bunch of guys that they can plug in who do similar things or have similar skill set.
Yeah, and a quick note on Manisa Bailey. He is a burner, and if you look at where he came from Morgan State. The Eagles actually have a history of a brief history of finding talent from Morgan State. If you remember, a few years ago, they found Josh Andrews, an undrafted offensive lineman. He stuck around for a little bit with the Eagles, and then I think he went on to the Minnesota Vikings. But that's a testament to the Eagles scouting department. They always seem to find – there always seems to be at least 1 or 2 undrafted players that are in the running to make a roster spot. You look at Nate Herbig last year. You look at some of the guys like Luke Juriga this year. We talked about Elijah Riley. And as I understand, they really like this undrafted class. So I think that that's a testament to the scouting department and bringing in guys that can compete for roster spots.
Yeah, because last year, like we said, when Deshaun gets hurt, they didn't have anybody. Now, if Deshaun gets hurt, all right, we've had a bunch of guys here that are speed guys that can do those kind of things. If JJ starts and he doesn't play well, all right, we have a couple other guys. Like Greg Ward last year, he caught the ball. That was something that this team really struggled with. He just didn't have the speed. So, okay, you filled a role of catching the ball, but you still didn't fill what Jackson did, and that's why this offense was so limited. But it seems that now they have a lot of depth. And I want to ask you about Marquise Goodwin and whether or not, I mean, he's another speed guy. Do you think he is a definitive making this team?
Well, I had a conversation with some family that live out in San Francisco that have season tickets that go to all the Niners games. And I said, what can you tell me about Marquise Goodwin? Obviously, he's got world-class speed, but his biggest issue has been staying on the field. It's been limiting his production. I believe he only had 10 catches last season. So with Marquise Goodwin, he's very small. He's very small, but he does have that track speed. And like we were saying, but beyond Deshaun Jackson, with Alshon starts the season on PUP, there's no veteran presence there. Where's the veteran wide receiver beyond him? And I think that he almost needs to. He got him for nothing, but there's enough speed there, and he's been productive enough that I think that kind of warrants the roster spot alone.
Yeah, I know that. I think, and it's a shame that we don't have these mini camps, because there's so many young guys that would have been a part of this that we would have got some good intel on from yourself and Jeff and Adam that really would have been cool to kind of find out. And you wonder what kind of impact some of these guys will have, because there's no, especially like the skill position players, because there being no on-field mini camp stuff, the rookie stuff, because the Eagles would have had a rookie camp going on, and you would have had John Hightower and Quez Watkins and Bailey and these guys that we're kind of talking about out there right now.
Yeah, that's been one of the biggest kind of curveballs thrown into the offseason is, first of all, there's a lot of very there's a lot of talented players that didn't get drafted that are still unsigned, because normally they would have been rookie minicamp invites, tryout players, but they haven't gotten that opportunity, obviously, because there isn't any. And as far as the guys that have been signed as undrafted players, well, they're behind the 8 ball. They were behind the 8 ball anyway, but now essentially it's kind of highlighted even more so, because they need every rep to be able to make an impression on the coaching staff, which they're not going to have. And you have to temper expectations as far as the rookie wide receivers, because this is supposed to be their learning, their kind of classroom sessions here when they're really kind of getting integrated to the offense, and now they're deprived of that.
All right, weekend is here. Of course, Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, powered by InsideTheBirds.com. Check out those guys over there. And, of course, Andrew, you can read more at 97.3ESPN.com. He will be on the Eagles beat all season long. Soon as it opens back up, Andrew will be there covering the team and, of course, a part of Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash. Andrew will be back on Tuesday's edition of Football at 4. Thanks, pal.
No problem, guys. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, man. He, like all guests, appear via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.